I started my career at OMB right as the program assessment rating tool was getting started. I did 7 parts myself as a young budget examiner in the housing branch of OMB. So I had a lot of familiarity with that tool. And then kind of fast forward 8 years ago, the very last year of the Bush administration, I came into this job being responsible for leading the government's performance and management work. And so it's an area that I've focused on a lot. One of the things I think that the Bush administration deserves a lot of credit for was first asking the right questions with PART. I thought it was a really effective tool in that regard. Second thing is they recognized the shift that was needed from kind of the idea that budget performance integration was the end goal, which was the original objective of the Bush administration's focus in this area, toward performance improvement, which is a shift that was made midway through the Bush administration. And I think that was an extremely important kind of realization that ultimately our work is about improving performance, not just informing budget decisions, although obviously that's critical as well. But they established through an executive order the idea of having a performance improvement officer in each agency, as well as establishing an interagency performance improvement council, which obviously we still have today. But the transition from Bush to Obama really gave us an opportunity to take a step back and look and see what kind of tools do we have in place and how can we better align them to the actual goal of performance improvement. So we did a lot of kind of studying of what other governments do, whether it's the UK government and Michael Barber's effort there with the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit, or state and local efforts within the US, whether it's Baltimore or New York City and some of the STAT movements that you see a lot of mayors and even governors moving forth. And all of those had one real common theme in place, which is that they were used and useful to agency leadership, as well as the underlying organization. So what we tried to do is identify some things we could incorporate into this administration's management approach that would get leaders engaged. And probably the most obvious way we did that was in the first budget guidance that was released by President Obama. We asked each agency to identify a limited number of high priority performance goals that could be achieved over the next 2 years. We wound up getting about 126 of them in total, but we really saw agency leadership engage in that effort much more so than I think the previous efforts. The fact that we asked them to identify a limited number really sent a signal that we expected agency leadership to personally engage, and I think that was actually quite a helpful way to start the effort, even though we only gave them 6 weeks to send in their draft goals, which is a bit of a shock to the system, admittedly. But fast forward a little bit then into 2010 when we had a chance to work with Congress. Congressman Cuellar had a government reform bill that was getting some traction on the House, and we had a chance to go out and meet with the congressman and explain why we thought the approach we were currently working was a better fit than the original draft bill that would have put a lot of the Bush administration's work into law. And he was open to hearing from us what we thought would be best. And so I remember that was a Friday night, I think even. I went home and basically tried to provide track change edits to his original bill, incorporating much of our work. Then we had a chance to work with the Senate, and GAO obviously was heavily engaged as well, and ultimately landing on an update to the original 1993 GIPRA Act that essentially gave us much kind of better structure for moving performance work forward with 3 tiers. You have cross-agency priority goals, agency priority goals, and then the broad base of strategic objectives and strategic reviews that agencies do. And that, I think, is a much better reflection of leading management practices that we see in the private and public sector, and emphasizes performance management routines as an example. Just as a little aside, the original GIPRA from 1993 didn't even have the words performance management in it. It was much more about a plan and a report. So I think we've really been able to update and modernize the foundational system that we rely on for performance improvement, but do it in a way also that gives agencies a lot more flexibility. This isn't one size fits all. HUD and NASA and DOD all have very different systems, different cultures, different types of objectives. And so we want to try to do this in a way that gives them the flexibility they need to ensure it can be integrated into their core processes. Ultimately, we think that gives it the best chance of both being useful but also lasting and surviving the test of time.